They say I talk too much, say I ask the wrong things. But if the truth feels weird, then I'm pulling that string. So quote me, it's probably nothing. Just asking questions, yeah, that's my thing. Laughing through chaos, digging through lies. If it makes you uncomfortable, I'm doing it right. So quote me, it's probably nothing. Say it too loud, now it's stuck in your head. If this all goes wrong, just remember I said it's probably nothing.
Hey, welcome back to Don't Quote Me, It's Probably Nothing, the podcast where I get high and talk about weird stuff. I'm Kelly, and I'm high. Also, if you're wondering if my microphone sounds different, and maybe even better, it's because I don't know if you remember me telling you this, but in the beginning of my podcast episodes, I think I mentioned often that I didn't know what the heck I was doing. Okay. And I still don't. However, I think I finally know how to use my microphone. But anyway, I'm talking about something today that's really cool. I'm talking about like science because I'm feeling a little sciencey. And I'm also talking about not science. Also, what was your favorite subject when you were in high school? I didn't have a favorite subject in school. Well, it just doesn't have to be just high school, like elementary school too, if you had a favorite subject. But I didn't have a favorite subject. I had a least favorite subject, and I think you all know what that was. It was math. History and science were my favorite though. Like they're equally up there. And then I also I didn't mind religion either because I went to Catholic school. We called it religion in elementary school and then they called it theology in high school. But I didn't mind that class either. I liked them all really, except for math. But anyway, let's find out if God is real or science is just science or if they're together, if I worded that correctly. So around 13.8 billion years ago, the entire universe, like all of space, time, matter, and energy, was condensed into a single point of infinite destiny and heat called a singularity. So the laws of physics as we know them actually break down at this point, which is like the point of like general relativity or whatever. And we don't know what caused the singularity or what existed before it because time itself began at this moment. And that's what they call the Big Bang Theory. And the Big Bang wasn't like an explosion in space. It was a sudden, violent expansion of space itself. So in the first trillionth of a second, okay, which is probably like I don't even know how to explain that right now. Like a second is so short in our time. But like a trillionth of a second is like, I don't even know how to explain that. But anyway, in that those first second things that I was just talking about, the universe underwent inflation and it grew exponentially, literally doubling in size at least 90 times. So this smoothed out the universe, which is why when we look at the sky today, it looks like roughly the same in every direction. And as the universe expanded, it cooled down and it was originally too hot for atoms to form. It was just like a soup of like quarks and gluons. Science has such funny words. Also, I bet not people, but like whatever existed at that time. Is that where the language Klingon came from? Because I feel like, yeah. Anyway, so after about 1 second, which is still such like a short period of time, between the trillionth of a second and 1 second, like after the 1 second, the universe cooled enough for protons and neurons to form. And within the first 3 minutes, the heat was still intense enough to fuse these particles into the first atomic nuclei, mostly hydrogen and helium. So for the first 380,000 years, the universe was like a hot, opaque plasma. Light couldn't travel through it because it kept bumping into free electrons. And eventually it cooled enough for electrons to bind to nuclei, forming neutral atoms. And suddenly the universe became transparent. And then the light that was released at that exact moment is still traveling through space today. And we call it the cosmic microwave background, or the CMB. And it's essentially like a baby picture of the universe. So after the CMB was released, the universe went dark for like hundreds of millions of years. There weren't any stars yet. They were just like clouds of gas. And then gravity began pulling these clouds of hydrogen together. And around 200 to 400 million years after the Big Bang, the pressure in like these clouds became so great that nuclear fusion ignited and the first stars were born, ending the Dark Ages, which the Dark Ages were when the stars weren't born. Anyway, so from a scientific perspective, the universe is governed by several fundamental constants, like the strength of gravity or the mass of an electron. And if the expansion rate of the Big Bang had been different by like a fraction of a fraction, the universe would have either collapsed back on itself instantly or expanded too fast for stars to ever form. And then this is where like the whole science meets God conversation begins, because like, is it a mathematical miracle or something else? So in theology, so there's this thing called the I don't speak Latin, so this is going to be bad. It's called the ex nihilo concept. Probably pronounced that wrong. But in theology, the term is creatio ex nihilo, which is Latin, and it means creation out of nothing. So for centuries, scientists thought that the universe was a steady state, meaning like it had always existed. But when the Big Bang theory was proven, suddenly science agreed with Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, which says there was a beginning, or like in the beginning, or something like that. Actually, it's probably there was a beginning. I feel like I should know this. I know it has the word beginning. Anyway, so if the universe consists of space, time, and matter, then whatever caused the universe must be spaceless, timeless, and immaterial. And this aligns perfectly with the traditional definition of God. So the Gospel of John begins with, "In the beginning was the Word." So the Gospel of John begins with, "In the beginning was the Word," or sometimes older Bibles will say logos. And in Greek philosophy, logos means more than just a word. It means logic, reason, or the blueprint. And many believers argue that the universe isn't just like a chaotic explosion, but like a structured system governed by laws, like math and physics. And the fact that the universe is intelligible suggests an intelligent mind behind the math. And that argument that they have is often called the teleological argument, which, remember how I said like some theories have weird names? Some of these names are a little weird. Anyway, but it suggests that the dials of the universe were set so precisely that even a microscopic change would have prevented life, which is what I said earlier, where like it could have like collapsed, or like the other thing that I said. So like for example, so when Amy was little, when she would talk to you and she would try to say, for example, she would ask, okay, hold on, let me gather my thoughts because they're all over the place. So she would ask for something like to eat. She would be like, "Mom, can I have something for dinner? For sample, maybe spaghetti." But instead of saying like, for example, she would say for sample. And it was just, so cute. I love the way some kids like mispronounce words because it's just so innocent and so cute. And like James used to call a hamburger, he used to call it a ham beagle. He's like, "Mom, can I have a ham beagle?" Oh, he's going to be so mad at me if he hears this. But anyway, for sample, gravity. So if the gravity is like slightly stronger, stars would burn out too fast. And if it's weaker, planets wouldn't form. And the expansion rate at which it expanded, like if it's 1% faster, then no galaxies would form. And if it's 1% slower, the universe collapses instantly. And if the force holding the atoms together changed by like 0.5%, then carbon couldn't exist. So there is a famous argument by Thomas Aquinas, and it's the uncaused cause. Basically, everything that begins to exist has a cause. So the universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. So to avoid an infinite loop of who caused that, there must be a first cause that is uncaused. And uncaused meaning an eternal being that exists outside of our timeline. So now that I explained all that, probably in a not explainable way, I hope you understood it. But I want to talk about spiritual warfare because, like, is it a thing? Is it not a thing? You know? So I'm going to talk a little bit about it and explain some things about if it's a thing or not. So in the context of the beginning, spiritual warfare comes in when we discuss like purpose. So in regards to like our purpose or whatever. So on one hand, there's like the Big Bang proves that we're like a cosmic accident or biological machines with no meaning. And then on the other hand, there's God used the massive energy of the Big Bang to craft a home specifically for us. And the warfare is often the struggle to believe we have value in a universe that seems so like vast and empty. You know, so in almost every theological framework, God is the source, and God is described as omnipotent, which is all power. I almost started talking in a Southern accent. See, it just pops in out of nowhere. Okay. So God is often described as omnipotent, which is all powerful, omniscient, or I think that's how you say that. I should know it because they literally drilled it into our heads since kindergarten, but that's all knowing, and omnipresent, which is everywhere at once. So the core of God's identity is love and order. And this is why the universe has laws like gravity and physics. And he is a restorer of a father figure who seeks relationship with humanity. And the goal of him is to bring creation into shalom, which means perfect peace and wholeness, and to have humans reflect his image. But he has an adversary. In most theology, Satan is not God's equal. God is the creator. Satan is a created being or an angel who rebelled. And he's a fallen entity, not a second God. So his name, the name Satan, literally means the accuser or the adversary, and he is often described as a deceiver and the father of lies. And he doesn't usually show up as like a monster. He shows up as an angel of light or a whisper of doubt. And his main goal isn't just to make people bad, but to make them distracted or discouraged or disconnected from God. And his goal ultimately is to steal, kill, and destroy, specifically to destroy the image of God in humans. So science can explain actions like, sorry, if you hear me yelling, my cats are literally fighting in the chair right next to me. So I have a fat cat named Rocco and my son's cat Tolkien. They wrestle a lot, like they play a lot. And Rocco is so fat, he literally just sits on the other cats and just beats them up. And the other cats can't do anything about it because Rocco is too fat. They can't push him off of him. So science can explain actions, but it struggles to explain the existence of like objective evil, which is the sense that some things are just like fundamentally wrong. So if there's a moral law that we all feel, like that things like murder or child abuse are objectively wrong, then there must be a moral lawgiver. And Satan wants to convince you that science has explained away God so that you stop looking for the truth. And most spiritual warfare doesn't look like a scene from a movie. It looks like a thought. So the primary site of spiritual warfare is the human mind. And the goal of the enemy is to influence your thoughts and your emotions and your decisions. And he uses these like lies or half-truths and strongholds, which are deeply ingrained patterns of negative thinking or behavior. And his goal is to move you from a state of peace and purpose into a state of fear, confusion, and apathy. So in the Bible, specifically in Ephesians 6, the armor of God is the most famous description of how to handle spiritual warfare, and is less about physical gear, obviously, and more about like spiritual posture. And there's something called like the belt of truth, and that's knowing the facts, like the science and theology that we talked about earlier, so that you can't be easily lied to. And then there's the breastplate of righteousness, and that's guarding your heart and your character. And then there's the shield of faith, and that's used to extinguish the flaming arrows of doubt or sudden anxiety. And then there's the sword of the Spirit, and this is the only offensive weapon mentioned, and it's the word of God. So the word of God is like a sword. They use it to cut through the lies of the enemy. Anyway, some things that people might hear are things that like, oh, you're a failure, or you're stupid, or something like that, or, after what you did, God could never love you. But that is not true, because God convicts us to change and Satan condemns us to stay stuck. And then you're kind of isolated because you may feel like you're the only one struggling and that you should pull away from like your friends or family or community or something. That could be like a flaming arrow, And another one is division, like unexplained conflict in relationships, especially when you're trying to do something good or meaningful, And then you could feel like some oppression for some reason, like a heavy, unexplainable sense of like dread or hopelessness or like a spiritual fog. They're like all things that could be spiritual warfare. So like, and the way that they describe it is like not something that like you'll hear it like in your mind. Like how there's people out there who are like, they're so negative all the time, everything is negative. Everything. And then there's other people who are happy all the time. Well, for the most part, are happy all the time. They appear happy all the time, right? And it's always like those negative ones always dislike the happy ones. It's kind of like that. So, science tells us that the majority of the universe is like dark matter or dark energy, right? Things that we know exist, but that we cannot see. And spiritual warfare operates on like a similar logic. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it isn't exerting a force on you. And that's like a cause and effect thing, because like if you notice that every time you try to help someone or that you try to grow as like a person or something, you'll have like bad luck. I use quotes there. Or like heavy mental resistance will hit. Well, that could be a pattern because it happens every time. And a pattern suggests a cause. Okay, so the most common tactic when it comes to the strategy of deception is not making you do something evil immediately, but like twisting the truth so that you can justify a small step in the wrong direction. And so basically it's convincing you that everyone else is doing it or it's not hurting anyone. And that would be using half-truths or taking things out of context to make a sin seem like a logical choice. And it also disguises consequences by hiding the long-term pain of an action behind the short-term pleasure. So there's also things happening like spiritual warfare happening through like open doors and stuff like that. So like think of as like a virus attacking a weak immune system, right? So spiritual influence often targets areas where a person is already hurting or already tired. So you are your most vulnerable to spiritual attack when you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. And Satan will use past pain to foster bitterness or unforgiveness or a desire for like numbing behaviors. There's also comparison too, like using social media or other success to breed envy, which is a gateway to resentment and greed. Sometimes my husband gets angry when he's hungry and also when he's tired and also sometimes when he's alone. Anyway, so a stronghold is a pattern of thinking that like becomes a habit. It's like a mental fortress where the enemy can influence you from the inside. And they do that with lies, like whispering, like, oh, you're worthless or unlovable or a lost cause. And then once you believe that lie about yourself, you're more likely to act in ways that reflect that lie. And then there's also fear and anxiety, like paralyzing someone with like what ifs. So they never step into their calling or trust God or be like better, And then there's like the gradual desensitization. And a lot of people call this like the frog in the pot method thing. So it starts with like a small, seemingly harmless compromise. By the time the sin becomes major, the person is already like desensitized to the small versions of it for months or even years. People normalize the darkness, and that influences the culture or environment around a person so that things that were once considered wrong start to feel normal or even good. And I did mention this earlier, but God uses conviction, which is like a gentle nudge to fix a mistake. And Satan uses condemnation, which is a heavy weight meant to make you give up. Like there's times like where I'll do something and like right away I'll like hear something in my mind like, you probably shouldn't have done that. Like that's conviction, So like after a person makes a mistake, the enemy will whisper things like, oh, well, you already messed up. You might as well keep going. Like you're a hypocrite anyway, And then the shame of that keeps people in the dark. And then if the enemy can keep you too ashamed to talk about your struggle, then he can keep you under his thumb. I know that probably sounded like a whole bunch of gibberish. Maybe not. But I was on Reddit. And I do have something that I'm going to tell you personally, like from myself, but I was on Reddit looking at some spiritual warfare stuff and I wanted to like read other people's stories, So I will. So this one is from Adam8992 and it says, Hey everyone, just wanted to share something that completely flipped my perspective on angels, demons, and the unseen world. I used to be pretty skeptical and figured the whole spiritual warfare idea was either blown out of proportion or just a metaphor. That was until I had an experience I can't really explain in any other way than a battle between light and darkness. A few weeks ago, I felt this overwhelming heaviness at night, almost like the room itself turned cold. I remember praying, half in fear, for God to protect me. Suddenly, I felt the weight lift and a sense of calm rush through me that I still can't put into words. It was like getting shoved from the darkness and into the light at the last second. I realized angels and demons aren't just mythical ideas and that they're part of the reality Scripture talks about. Anyway, that one moment was enough to remind me we can have all the comforts of the world, but if we don't have Christ, we really have nothing. There's so much more going on that we see on the surface. I know it's easy to doubt, to feel impatient for Jesus' return, or to miss the homeland we've never actually been to, but I truly believe God is working in ways we can't imagine, even fighting battles on our behalf. Have any of you experienced something that confirmed angels or demons are real for you? Would love to hear your stories or thoughts. Thanks for reading and God bless. So I was reading the comments and nobody really commented saying that they had stories, but they were just commenting like stuff about his stuff. Okay, so I'm going to read you one of them where people are talking about like if they've had an encounter with the devil and then if they've had an encounter with God. Also, saying the devil is weird. I actually feel like I don't want to say it. But anyway, when I was younger, I used to play at this kid's house down the street. And I remember we were outside and we were digging in the dirt and we dug like not very far down, maybe 2 inches, maybe 4 inches actually. It was like a little hole and there was a bunch of roots and the roots were like a reddish orange. And I remember being like so scared. I was like, oh my gosh, it's the devil. And then I used to like walk around and stomp on the ground and be like, I'm stomping on the ground because I'm stomping on you, Satan, you know? And I used to give the ground the middle finger all the time, which I actually don't think was a individual experience because I think a lot of people have done that because it's not bad if you're doing it to the devil, you know? I found a good one, but it's from Deleted. So Deleted, I'm sorry, I don't know who you are. Okay, so it says, I've had a few experiences and I'll share a couple that stood out. My sister got me hooked on a show about devils and hell. I rationalized it in my head as if they were aliens on another planet, but eventually it got to the point where I couldn't stop noticing all the pentagrams and other references to evil, hell, demons, etc. I went to watch an episode one night and I got the sense that there was something behind me, something evil, hateful, and malevolent beyond what I can accurately describe on the spot. I think, not 100%, but pretty sure, the Holy Spirit must have revealed to me that if I clicked on that episode to start it, that would be it. Whatever that evil was behind me, it would attack. The moment I closed the tab and moved on, that evil presence vanished. I haven't watched the show again, and I am happier for it. The second happened in relation to books. I don't read Stephen King for several reasons, among which is the fact that he's admitted to hating God. I have a relative, we'll call her G, who loves Stephen King and owns every book he's released to my knowledge. Instead of asking me, an avid reader at the time, if I even liked Stephen King, she simply forced me to promise to hold on to his books and take care of them for her. I had those books on a shelf in my closet for 2 years with the door closed. Anytime, especially at night, I tried to leave the door open, something evil watched me from inside the closet, waiting. For what, I'm not sure, but it was waiting. G finally called me up and said, paraphrasing, "Hey, I want my books back to read." I happily handed them over. Since then, I'm able to leave my closet door open all the time and there's no evil presence watching me. Spirits and demons are real. People don't want to believe, but they are. I'm currently struggling with off and on dreams that have distinctly evil presence behind them. I don't know if it's a demonic attack or what, but this stuff is real. So I actually have something that kind of relates to that. Okay. So me and my husband watched this show. It was called Evil. And I think it was on like regular cable, maybe ABC or something like that. And it was pretty good. I mean, I liked it. But then like the more and more I would watch it, I'm like, man, this doesn't seem right, you know? But I could not stop watching it. And like we binged it. And then eventually Jim stopped. And then like I was still going. And I was laying in bed one night and I was scrolling through TikTok on my phone like I usually do. And I felt like something was watching me. And like I thought I heard a growl. But then I was like, oh, no, I didn't, because that's what I told myself. I didn't, because it could have been Clarabelle snoring, but Clarabelle wasn't in the room at the time. But anyway, it felt not nice. And then like I heard like this breathing or whatever. And this has never happened to me ever in this house or any other house. And then like every time I closed my eyes, I just saw this like tall, dark figure with like these huge horn things that went backwards. And it had like red eyes. And I was so scared. Like I was praying so hard, right? And that's what I saw every time I closed my eyes. And then with my eyes open, I was like, I think I keep seeing it. So I turned the flashlight on my phone, and I had my phone sitting up. I was trying to sleep, but every single time I would try to keep my eyes closed, they would like pop back open just to be sure that there was nothing there. I was literally up for hours. I was so tired the next morning, and it was getting closer and closer to 3:30. And when I was younger, I used to watch a lot of like paranormal investigations and a haunting and stuff like that. And I know that sometimes the devil appears like when the time strikes like 3:33. Or sometimes 666. And I think I have it confused, but I believe that 666 technically isn't like it's not evil. It's in the Bible. It has to do with something, but like the reason the devil sometimes comes at 333 is because it's like he's like mocking God. I think it's the crucifixion or something like that when he had died. I think I could be confusing the two. It could be the other way around, like with the numbers. But anyway, it was getting closer to 3:30, and on like the haunting shows and stuff like that, it would have like 333 as a thing when things would happen. And I was looking at my clock because I knew 3:33 was coming. Like I literally was so scared. And Jim was like sleeping right next to me. This was a couple years ago. And I didn't know how to wake him up and tell him like I think something's happening, you know? And at 3:33, my flashlight on my phone turned off, and I didn't touch it. I wasn't holding it. It was just sitting on my nightstand. And I grabbed my phone real quick, and I kept trying to turn the flashlight on. And the entire time that my phone had the time displayed that said 3:33, my flashlight would not turn on. But once it hit 3:34, it went right on. Literally almost shit my pants. I was so scared. And then after that, I have not watched that show ever again. And I will never watch it ever again. And that's also why, like, I don't go to places that are, like, actually haunted, you know? I'll go to places that could be, like, pretend haunted, like, just pretend, maybe, sometimes, not all the time. But yeah, that kind of reminded me of that. And that's why I told you that. But that's not even one of the stories that I wanted to tell you today. But let me read something else, and then I'll get to that one. Also, I just want to say this real quick, that when I went to see Stephen Wilson Jr., the other day, well, like last week or whenever it was, he talked about the story behind him writing his song that's titled The Devil. And it's not my story to tell. However, if you go on YouTube and you type in Stephen Wilson Jr. and like Philly it was on March 25th, and someone recorded like the whole show, and you like fast forward to that part, it is so good, the story that he told. And I thought it was amazing. The concert itself was amazing too. I don't know how to explain it. It was just so good. So this one is from Asparagus. And if her name's Sarah, that is actually the best name ever. Anyway, so it says, after high school and early college, I had strayed away from my religion. I was doing a lot of things I shouldn't have. I met someone and got even further. I was in that toxic, chaotic, confusing, consuming relationship for 3 years, and I was miserable every day. Thought after a while, the only good thing that came out of it was not doing things I was doing before. But no, that wasn't it. Before I started my first big girl job, I was struggling and stressed. At the time, my life was about to change drastically. I leaned onto my partner for emotional support, thinking I would magically get some because I never did. He let me cry alone. His feelings were always 10,000 times more important than mine. I remember sitting at the edge of the bed, and while I cried, I told him I can't believe I'm with someone who doesn't console me, hold me, hug me, or tell me it'll be okay. And this sums up our relationship entirely. So that night, I sat in the bathroom and I cried out to God to please help me. Please remove me. Please save me from the excruciating hurt of being with someone who doesn't love you the same back. I prayed the same prayer so many times, but this time it was different. So a week later, after a fight that I wouldn't let him dismiss again, he threw his average tantrum and told me he was leaving. This time there was no freaking out and begging for him to stay. I was serene. I had an overwhelming feeling of silence. I heard let him go, so I brushed my teeth and went to bed and didn't say a single word as he shut the door. A few weeks later, I was at the pool with my friends. Just because I managed to be quiet about that night didn't make the whole thing any easier. I was struggling hard while he was moving on already, but we were in the pool, and as I was floating on a float, a little blue butterfly was dancing around. I said silently to myself, if this is your doing, land that blue butterfly on my big toe. The second after the mental punctuation, the butterfly landed on my toe. As humans typically do, doubt. I asked him to do it again. The butterfly hung out with me for the rest of the day. I had found God again, right when I needed needed him the most, he showed up for me. I love when you ask for a sign and then you get it, because like I shit my pants every time, which I'm actually going to tell you about that right now. Well, I'll tell you that in a minute. I'm going to tell you something else first. So I grew up going to Catholic school, right? So we were taught that God is real and Jesus died for our sins, because that's what they taught you in school. And then also like at home, my parents didn't teach me that, So like I learned it in school, but didn't learn it at home at the same time, if that makes sense. So like I always believed that there was something out there, but like, what is it? You know what I mean? So when I got to high school, I did what all teenagers do. And I'm like, nah, don't think this is real. So fast forward to 19, I had my daughter. She was a baby. And I just got my license when I was pregnant. So I was on the older side kind of getting my license. I'm a late bloomer. But anyway, so I had just got my license, so I was a new driver. And while I was pregnant with Amy, Jim was driving on the Blue Route, which I hate that road. And we ended up getting in a car accident. So I was terrified to drive on the highway, especially with the baby in the car. So I was taking college classes and I lived a couple of towns away, and my father-in-law would watch the baby. So every day, if you're familiar with Delco, I'm going to say a couple words. So I would take 352 past like Linville Orchards and then take back roads through Brookhaven to like McDade to go into Fallcroft. So every day when I was on 352, right when I would get to Linville Orchards, it was this certain intersection. For those who aren't familiar with that area, I would always end up stuck at a red light. And every single time I was at that red light, I would look down at my clock in my car and it would say 7:35. And I'm like, that's so weird. Every single day for months, I would stop here and it would be 7:35. That's insane. So one day I'm driving and I get close to the on-ramp for 352, like off of Baltimore Pike. And I'm driving and I'm like, you know what? Maybe I'll take the highway, which I never do. So I get over one lane to go around all the cars that are going to be turning so that I can get on the ramp to go on the highway, like the little merge on thingy for the highway. Well, it was the bypass. It's not a highway, but it was a highway to me. So I get over a lane and then at the last second, I'm like, you know what? I am going to take 352. So I get back over. And this is right at the ramp. Like I have to go across the lane and get on the ramp. Like there's no cars around, but if there was cars, I'd be cutting them off. So I go to get up that ramp and I hear the loudest, deepest, like most thunderous voice say no. Like this voice was so deep and so loud that it rattled the windows in my car. So I didn't get on that ramp. I got on the highway and I was scared the entire time. So I get to my father-in-law's and I get my daughter set up and he's always watching the news in the morning. So I'm like, I give Amy kisses and I'm like, I'll see you later. And I'm walking by the TV and I didn't even look at it, but I heard the news anchor was like, the accident happened at 7:35 this morning. And I was like, huh? And I turned and I looked at the TV and on the TV is the gnarliest accident I've ever seen in my life. There's a truck was in two pieces and the other person who got hit by this truck did not survive. And the intersection that it happened at was the intersection at Linville Orchards where I stopped every single morning at that red light at 7:35. And that was like wild to me. That was when I was like, okay, maybe he's real. You know what I mean? Because like that literally could have been me and my daughter. We probably wouldn't have survived. Isn't that wild to think about? Like that's such a wild thing. But also I have something else. So even after that happened, from that time from 19 until me now at 37, there were times where I still like, I didn't read the Bible. I didn't pray. Like, not like I do today. I haven't read the Bible in a little while actually, but I pray and talk to God literally every single day and every morning. Like in the morning, I thank him for waking me up and I say good morning. That's something I just started doing, is saying good morning to him as like the first thing. But I do pray every night for like, oh my gosh, I pray for everyone. I pray for like all my friends and my friends' families and like all of my clients. And then I pray for like their families, you know? I'm praying for everybody. You get a prayer and you get a prayer. Anyway, so I have something else to tell you. And this actually happened recently. So I was praying and I wanted clarification on something. And I don't usually ask God for signs, but like this time I was really deep in thought about something. Like I was feeling something pretty heavy. And I was like, you know what? If this is for me, then please show me a big red truck. And then I was like, wait, no, that's too obvious. That's too There's red trucks everywhere. Show me a lime green car tomorrow on my way to work in the morning. And then the next morning, I'm driving to work. A truck comes up. I see it in like my rearview mirror. So I look, and behind me is a big red truck with the words "Big Red Truck" written on it. And I didn't even know a company called Big Red Truck even existed. Ever. Never seen this truck in my life. And the wild thing is that truck moved, switched lanes. I was watching it in my rearview mirror because I was shocked that there was a big red truck behind me with the words "Big Red Truck" on it after I just asked for that, kind of. And then right when the truck moved, behind it was a lime green car. And that is also wild. So like, I don't know what you all think out there, but I definitely think that God is real. So if you have any stories like that or something and you want to tell them to me so I can share them, feel free. But I hope you guys like this episode. And I hope you guys have a happy Easter if you celebrate. I know I'll have a happy Easter because I love the food that I cook on Easter. So we get like a honey baked ham sometimes a regular ham. And I make sweet potatoes, like sweet potato casserole with the brown sugar and the marshmallows and stuff. And I make homemade mac and cheese. And I usually have asparagus, sometimes broccoli, and Hawaiian rolls. Can't forget the Hawaiian rolls. I can eat them by the pack myself. They're the best rolls I've ever tasted in my life. But anyway, that's where I'm going to leave you guys because this has become a very long episode. But I hope you liked it because I know I did. I guess that's all that matters, right? I mean, I want you guys to like it too, but I had fun. Shout out to those listening on Nighthawk Radio. If you haven't checked them out yet, please do it because you might find your new favorite podcast out there. And if you want to try some clean energy without the crash and the jitters and all that fun stuff, you can go to www.dubby.gg and use code STAYWEIRD for 10% off. You can do it if you want. And also, Don't Quote Me, It's Probably Nothing is now part of the Screaming Podcast Network. They have some podcasts on there that are like horror and true crime. And this one. But yeah, go check them out because maybe if you are a horror movie fan, maybe you will like it. Anyway, the song of the week this week is called I'm Not Dead, and it's by Messina. And I think you should go stream it wherever you listen to your music. Stay weird, stay curious, go be kind to someone for no reason, and go be amazing.